What is up, everyone? This is the F6P NFL DFS Kickoff Show. Yes, do not adjust your screens. Keith Flemming, the host, myself, I'm here despite the Georgia loss, despite the Falcons winning, and now it looks like we're going to win the freaking division. Like, this is my nightmare. But no matter what,
Falcons.
I'm here for the DFS content, trying to help you guys set your lineup, joined by my good buddy, truly call him Joe the Brain Matz for a reason, a.k.a. man, you had to like that Purdy Debo stack last week that you gave, right, Joe?
I liked it quite a bit. Debo really came through. So, and
Nobody
Purdy White, he
tackle
broke 300 too. So, yeah.
Nobody wanted to tackle that dude. It was a unbelievable performance. I, again, am just frustrated because I had Debo in almost every lineup, and like an idiot, I did not have Brock in every lineup. I had him in some, but I sprinkled in Wilson because I wanted to save $400. How'd that work out for me?
Yeah.
It seems always freaking backfire. But anyway, be sure to check out my work on fantasy6pack.net. The values article is already up. I am in the process of completing the DFS stacks article. Unfortunately, I did not do one last week, but I went back and looked. Of course, I missed out on a chance to brag, Joe. The Week 12 article included the stack of Kyron Williams, Kyler Murray, Greg Dortch, and Trey McBride scored 85 points, and it was like, I think, only 21% or something like that of your salary. I was like, oh, my God, Keith.
Yeah, take that.
Where was that? And it's been 2 weeks, so I completely forgot about it. But be sure to check out the DFS Den Show tomorrow night with Chris and Dave Eddy as they get you ready. And then Sunday, the Amazing Fantasy Six-Pack Sunday morning show where they get you through all your fantasy questions. And then me and Joe are on Fantasy and Frames on Friday doing our favorite dirt cheap DK plays, 4,500 and below, doing some prop bets and also some showdown lineups. Really, again, appreciate Joe Bond and the people at F6P for allowing us to do both. Truly do appreciate that. But we're going to get right into this because why waste time? I know we all want to watch the stellar matchup tonight between the New England Patriots and the Pittsburgh Steelers. I almost said it with a straight face. Actually, I'm sorry. Real quickly before we get in these QBs, pay attention, people. Bad weather is here. They're talking about potentially 5 awful, and I mean awful, weather games this week. Rams at Ravens. As of right now, potential rain, 20-plus mile-an-hour winds, low 40s temperatures. Lions, Bears, exact same thing. Colts, Bengals, exact same thing. Jags at Browns. How about a little bit more wind? 25-mile-an-hour winds and make it a little colder, mid-30s. And then the Texans at the Jets. Again, potential rain, 20-plus mile-an-hour winds in the 30s. So we talk about this. I'm sure we'll get into it in our plays. But obviously, I like running backs and defenses in these situations. But the wind is almost worse than the rain, wouldn't you say? Especially with the cold weather in these kind of games for the quarterbacks.
100% for the passing game is, I mean, obviously, look, it's never ideal if the ball's wet, but they've got gloves now that are so beyond what guys were playing with, even 10 years ago. And especially compared to back in the day when you're just rolling around in the mud, where that's not a huge, unless it's just pouring rain, it's not usually that big of a deal. But if you got high winds, I mean, unless Josh Allen is your quarterback, you're probably in trouble in the passing game.
And I mean, I'm going to tell you, some of these games are freaking scary QB situations in the first place because we got Flacco for the Browns, backup for the Jags, backup for the Colts. I know it's Minshew, backup for the Bengals. And who knows who's going to be the Jets quarterback. They got to try to find somebody that takes snaps at QB. So really just tough stuff. But again, you might have some value at running back and the wide receiver, or excuse me, the running back and defensive positions because of that. Having said that, and I am going to I will highlight any of the guys that are in these, and I'm going to go ahead and start with one, okay? But I trust this guy. It's Justin Fields, 6,800 versus Detroit. He is my median quarterback. Again, bad weather game, but Fields runs so much. It's almost like maybe this could be good for us. Last 4 games, 245 rushing yards. So he's starting to use his legs, which I honestly was not aware of. I knew early in the year he was not running as much. On DraftKings, he's averaging almost 26 points per game in his last 4 full games. What's insane is in those games, 9 passing touchdowns to 1 pick, which is not what you expect, especially when, again, he ran for 245 yards. So he's basically running it down the field and throwing in. I will say selfishly, as somebody that has him in fantasy, run it in, Justin. I'll take the extra 2 points, but that's okay. This week, facing a Detroit team that, man, earmuffs Dave Eddy and Chris Robin, but this defense is struggling. They've given up 30-plus points in 4 straight games. In those games, Jordan Love, Derek Carr, Justin Herbert, and Justin Fields combined for over 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns. And here's the big thing, Joe. Fields has played Detroit 3 times since last year. 321 rushing yards in those 3 games with a rushing touchdown. And oh, by the way, let's sprinkle in 4 passing touchdowns as well. I like Fields a lot, and I actually think this is a scary game for Detroit as Chicago has looked real frisky as of late. I'll get into DJ Moore, who I'm not as comfortable with, even though I am, going spoiler, giving him as one of my plays. But Fields, I feel good about either way because I just think with his running upside, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're exactly right about that game where, it's our classic fade Jared Goff game. He's outside. It's going to be terrible weather. That's when we want to bail. But Justin Fields, yeah, if he can run for 100 yards, we don't really care that it's going to be a struggle probably for both teams to pass. And as far as it goes, like I said, the guys who are least bothered usually by the bad weather passing the ball are the guys with cannons, which Justin Fields fall into that anyway. Yeah. So I like that one a lot. For me, it really came down to 2 guys. I do like Fields a little bit more, but I'll give my other guy 2 in this range because he's cheaper, and it's Brock Purdy again.
Yeah, I was going to say, your boy. Yeah, there you go.
And yeah, I've gotten in arguments this week with people saying like it's insane that that he's currently the betting favorite for MVP. Because
it is insane.
Let's just all be real about this. Like Brock Purdy's good. I don't want to say he's not a good quarterback, and especially he's a guy in his 2nd year. He's a top 15 quarterback. That's impressive on its own, let alone being the last pick of the draft. But he's a 10 to 15 guy. Like, let's not put him up there.
It's the QB award deal, though, that drives me crazy, Joe. Like, that's what drives me crazy. It should be Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill should be the MVP right now. Or CMC if you want to say a 49er.
Yeah, if I'm perfectly fine if you want to still say, like, hey, listen, as long as Kansas City wins 11 games, especially with that receiving core, it should be Mahomes. Like, fair argument, whatever. But if we're going to talk about Miami and San Francisco, 100% with Miami, it should be Tyreek Hill. And yeah, I know we saw what happened to San Francisco when they had no quarterbacks, because no team will be good with no quarterback, especially against a good defense like the Eagles last year. But yeah, McCaffrey and Tyreek are the guys who power these teams more than their quarterbacks, which is not to be disrespectful to the QBs. They're good. They're just not MVP guys. But in fantasy, we don't care about any of that. We just care about the production, and Brock Purdy has been quite productive. Last week, I mean, that's the beauty of this offense, the efficiency of it. Through 27 passes, he had 300 yards and 4 touchdowns against that Philadelphia defense. 3 of his last 4 games, he's hit 3 touchdowns. He's also broken 300 yards in 3 of the last 5. One of those other games was 296. In fact, the only recent game where he wasn't tearing it up, or at least yardage-wise, because the Cincinnati game he had a couple picks, was the Seattle game. So listen, Seattle did have success.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry.
Just a couple weeks ago. But one of the keys there is that's an at Seattle game. That's a tough environment. If you just look at Seattle over the last month. Yeah, Seattle over the last month, 8 passing touchdowns allowed to 2 picks. The 2 road games, it was 6 touchdowns to 0 picks. The 2 home games, it was 2 touchdowns to 2 picks. And that was Stafford and Purdy in the 2 home games for them. So at home, this is still a tough environment, a defense that can step up. 2 road games, listen, Dak's playing awesome. Maybe you can just say, like, hey, Cowboys are a buzzsaw against any defense that's not elite. Well, the other 3-touchdown, 300-yard game, that was Sam Howell. So this defense can be had when we go to DVOA, which, as I mentioned every week, adjusts for your opponents. This is the 26th ranked pass defense. So if I got the 26th ranked pass defense and I've got Brock Purdy with the full allotment of weapons, I'm in. Again, I do like Fields a little bit more. I think they're like right together for me. So if you have the $300, hey, go with Fields. But if you need that $300 and it makes some big difference at wide receiver, running back, I would be perfectly fine dropping down to Brock Purdy.
Yeah, I'm going to say that for cash games, that's what we specialize in. This week, it's these two guys. Like, I'm going to give you another one for MME, but don't get it twisted. Like, I'm not going to be using this guy or really any other quarterback other than those two because Brock has been so good. I still think he's really reasonably priced, and he's not got to worry about weather. And then again, Fields just the upside with the running. I'm honestly shocked he's not more because, again, almost 350 yards.
I was surprised when I played this team.
Yeah. So, and we'll get into too that him and DJ Moore are just scorching the earth right now. So, but I'm going to go to Homer Corner. Give me Desmond Ridder for my value play at 5K. And this is all about them being at home. This Falcons team, not a great offense in general, but huge difference on the road and at home. On the road, 14.7 points per game. At home, 22.8. I shared this with you the other night, Joe, so it wouldn't shock you. On the road, the Falcons are averaging 30 pass attempts for 150 yards. 5 yards per attempt. Yeah, that's what I'm having to watch week in and week out. At home, it's not great, but it's so much better. It's 35 attempts for 261 yards per. The big thing, Ridder, 6 of the 8 touchdowns this season have came when he was home. The other 2, I think one was by him and one was by Heineke. But again, he's just a different player at home. He's got 5 double-digit point games on DK. 4 of them have been at home. And again, the week 1 was really weird. So you're talking about his last 4 home games. He scored double-digit points. He scored 20-plus points in 3 of those games. On the road, in those home games, averaging 21.35 points per game. He's 5K. So if he can just do 17 points, he's going to hit that 3 times that we always look at, right? On the road, he's only averaging 10.52 points per game his last 4. And then just to make you feel a little more comfortable about it, in the only game this season that he scored double-digit points on the road was versus the opponent this week, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So he scored 16.8 points in their first matchup. He threw for 250 yards, had 38 yards, a rushing TD. And again, in MME, I kind of like this because I really do like Drake London. I'll get into why that later. But for cash games, it's going to be Fields and Purdy.
I like that one. He's almost super Goff, or at least what Goff used to be.
Right. I didn't even think about that.
At home, you're like, all right, I can roll with this, especially because he's always at a low price point. And on the road, it's just don't even consider
I'm not even thinking about it. Don't even watch it.
I'm going to stick with the same game, but I will go to the other side of the field. And Baker Mayfield, 5,300 against your Atlanta Falcons. One of the big upsides here is just, to your point earlier, weather, we don't have to worry about it at all in Atlanta because we're indoors. So the fact that we've got a number of buys this week, we've got a number of bad weather games, that already is constricting you. And Baker's very reasonable here. 4 of his last 6 games, we've had at least 2 touchdowns. And he hasn't missed entirely on throwing a touchdown since week 6 against Detroit.
Wow.
So we know we're not going to get completely left out, which is
especially against Atlanta's defense.
Especially against Atlanta. Per PFF's grades, the Bucs are the 7th best pass blocking team. The Falcons are the 6th worst pass rush. So you're already dealing with a situation where Baker should have plenty of time to throw. I agree with you on Ridder, which means we should see points, which means this shouldn't be some game where Baker only has to throw 27 passes. And again, that Atlanta defense, one of the great pass funneling defenses this year, 29th in DVOA against the pass, 10th against the run. So again, Rachaad White probably going to have some struggles trying to run the ball, although as we know with Rachaad White, it's not necessarily like a good, you still don't want to discard him because he could have 7 receptions for 70 yards.
He had 6 in the first one. So,
and the other thing that hopefully scares some people off, if they're aware of this, is that Atlanta has not given up a passing touchdown the last 3 weeks. Of course, one of those games was the Cardinals, where Kyler Murray just decided, I'll run for 2 touchdowns. So
one of them was the Jets.
And then the other is the Jets and the Saints, which the Saints still managed 300 yards in that game, but they're the Saints, so they just couldn't find ways to score touchdowns through the air. And yeah, the Jets barely count as a passing offense in the NFL. So I'm not worried about that at all. This is not a good pass defense. Like I said, they should not be getting a lot of pressure. Baker Mayfield still has reasonable receivers. If anyone follows you on social media, they know you brought up Mike Evans was a 10 straight 1,000-yard season. So he's not going anywhere. So Baker Mayfield, 5,300. Again, take your pick between Ritter and Mayfield if you're trying to go cheap, roll the dice on someone. Because, again, you've got 2 guys in plus matchups against defenses, and they're indoors, which is huge this week.
Yeah, and the other thing I like about that Mayfield play is the Bucs' run defense has all of a sudden looked real rough the last couple of weeks, which again could mean Atlanta scores more points. Baker and Evans, I mean, that's a dream scenario for that duo, because we know that if you start taking shots at Mike Evans, it may not be good things in the overall scheme of the game, but it's very good things for fantasy owners of both, because Mike Evans is just ridiculous. The running backs this week, I'm trying to figure out if it's going to be Kamara or CMC paired with these 2 backs, but I have pretty much locked in these 2 guys. I'm going to go. They're not very differently priced, but Joe Mixon is the first one. He is 6,100 versus Indy. This is another potential bad weather game. He scored double digits in 5 of 6 games, averaging 18.16 points per game in that span. At that price, that's right around, again, that 3 times money, right? So that's 6 games. He's right around that 3 times number of 18 points we need from 6,100. He's coming off his best fantasy game of the year with Browning as QB, which is a big deal. He rushed for 68 yards. He scored 2 touchdowns. Big thing, he caught 6 passes. He saw a season high in targets and receptions with Browning at QB. And this is why I love this play this week. 33% of his receiving yards on the season have came from the last 2 games with Browning. And now you are playing in a very bad weather game. I'd be shocked if Mixon doesn't catch at least 4 or 5 passes in this game. And the Colts D, they're not great against the run either. They are allowed 130 yards at least 4.5 yards per carry in 6 straight games. In that span, running backs have scored 9 touchdowns, whether on the ground or through the air. And this season, 8 running backs have finished top 10 on DK when facing the Indy Colts. 5 of them have finished top 4. So I think it's a really good matchup. Mixon's going to see a really high volume. And I really like, again, if this was not PPR and DraftKings, I probably wouldn't be on Mixon at all. But the amount of targets and receptions he's had the last 2 weeks, in fact, his receiving yards, Browning is not going to be slinging it like Burrow was, and it just means very good things for Joe Mixon. I like that he's got both, I think, a really high floor and a high ceiling.
Yeah, I mean, it is exciting to see that Bengals offense can still function without Joe Burrow, which also leads you to some questions about decision-making earlier in the season with that team, where they decided hobbled Joe Burrow should have to just keep battling it out, which maybe not the best choice. Yeah, which, sometimes it helps to just take care of your franchise QB. You alluded to it that Tampa Bay defense has not been the same thing that we're accustomed to over the last few years, and that's why Bijan Robinson, 6,500, is my play here. Big thing for Bijan, just finally getting the carries. It turns out it's good to give your top 10 running back the ball. 3 straight games with. One thing at a time, Keith. One thing at a time. Don't rush Arthur Smith. So 3 straight games with at least 16 carries, which he had only 1 such game prior to week 10. So this is a monumental change in how he is used. Unsurprisingly, 2 games with 90 yards rushing. His low in total yards over the last 3 weeks is 79. He has 3 touchdowns over that time span, all 3 games in double digits, averaging just over 18 points per game over those 3 weeks. And really, it's however you want to cut it. This Tampa Bay defense is now mediocre against the run. They're middle of the pack in DVOA, adjusted line yards. They're 19th. It's an aging defense. It's also a defense that has not been able to stop the pass well either. So again, this is like a load up on hopefully a game that people are not paying attention to because they're just gonna be like, oh, it's Bucks Falcons. But I think there's 50 plus points scored in this game. And so, especially if you think the Falcons are going to win, you can do Bijan. And the great thing is with the Bijan combo, if you like those quarterbacks, it doesn't matter. You could say, hey, Ritter's going to throw to Bijan some. I like them to win. I like there to be points for both guys. Great. You can do a Mayfield Bijan where, hey, if Bijan runs for 100 yards, has a couple touchdowns, Baker's got to throw to catch up. And neither of these is expensive. So I really love this Falcons-Bucks game just in general.
Love it. My value play is a perfect example of, like in poker, and I think I've discussed this before on here, you can do everything right and lose. And last week, we did everything right with Zach Moss at 4,600, and it didn't work out well. And you probably lost. Like, I actually ended up cashing a few lineups just by the grace of God. Really, you talking me into Purdy and Debo was the main thing that ended up making that happen. But, I mean, everything was what we thought. He played 67 of 71 snaps, 65 in the backfield. He had all 19 running back carries in the game. He ran 32 routes on 47 Minshew dropbacks. He had 3 targets for a 7.1% target share. 8 touches inside the 10-yard line. He had 7 rush attempts and a target in the passing game. The only other player to do that all this season, David Montgomery of the Lions, week 4, he scored 3 times in that game. The result was not great. It was 19 of 51 yards, 2 catches for 6 yards on the 3 targets. It was a dud. But I'm loading right back up with him because, again, we are in a bad weather matchup with a guy just getting an unbelievable workload against a team with a backup QB who maybe now with his 3rd start, defenses know a little bit more of what to expect. And I can't not play Moss at this price when you see the snaps and the route percentage and everything. Like, it's just, to me, it's a layup in cash games.
I have no argument against it. I think this is 100% the play. Last week, the only reason he wasn't one of my picks was, well, 1, because I knew you would pick him. And then 2, it's a tough matchup against Tennessee. That's it. That was the only reason. And even then, it was like, hey, it's worth it because he was 4,600. You roll the dice on that. He'd already done well against. He was the one guy who did go off against Tennessee.
He smoked him.
And yeah, now, listen, this is no longer Tennessee. This isn't a top 5 run defense that he's going to face, who's also a bottom 5 pass defense because that's what Tennessee is. So yeah, this is the play. The Colts are, I believe, moderate favorites even on the road against Cincinnati. So you assume this should at least be a close game, if not a game that the Indy is winning. So Moss should be heavily involved no matter what. And I mean, Jonathan Taylor's not out there anyway. So even if they fall behind, it's probably still a lot of Moss. Fire him up across the board. The only thing is if you're not doing a cash game, obviously Zach Moss, I assume, is going to be heavily, heavily owned. But that's literally the only reason I have for not wanting him in a lineup is he'll be heavily owned. So if you're a cash game, lock him in. You can
let the other person make the mistake, right? Like, that's the way.
Yeah, you decide if you want to go cheaper from there or more expensive from there with your other running back spot. But Zach Moss should be in your lineup.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it is, sometimes we need to be reminded that you can make all the right decisions, right? All the right moves, and it not work out. And that's why this really does remind me so much of poker, another, game that I really, truly love. And you just got to learn from it. But, if you make the right decision, you got to keep making them. The wide receivers, this is both the most risky play of the week, but also I think he's going to be in all my cash lineups because I just don't think I can say no. And it's DJ Moore, 6,500 versus Detroit. again, potential bad weather game. That scares me, obviously. But he has been an absolute supernova his last 4 full games with Justin Fields, because in the 2 games before Fields' injury, 391 yards receiving on 16 receptions for 4 touchdowns. Then he went through a stretch with Tyson Bagent where he never eclipsed 60 yards, which that sucks, but it is what it is. And then in the 2 games since he came back, they started right back where they were at, with him catching 18 passes on 22 targets, actually been more efficient for 210 yards and a score. And in case you just want to know, because it's absurd just to read, in his last 4 full games with Fields, he's averaging 10.25 targets, 8.5 receptions, 142.7 receiving yards, 32.52 points per game on DraftKings. What's insane, 26 points per game on FanDuel, which that's just absurd. And they're facing a Lions defense this week that I told you that they've given up 30 points in 4 straight games. Number 1 receivers in that span, 25 receptions for 484 yards and 9 touchdowns. I can't not do it. Like I'm probably going to have them. There will be some lineups that obviously I may go a different direction because there is some receivers in the 7K range I like, but at 65, it's just really hard to not play DJ Moore this week.
I mean, hopefully from your mouth to God's ears, because in one of my leagues, I got to get a win this week to make sure I get in the playoffs. And DJ Moore's been a big part of the wins that I've had this year. So hopefully that keeps up. There's 2 guys I really like right up just above DJ Moore. I mean, really, I like DK Metcalf too, to be fair. I think everyone in this range is a good play, from Ayuk down to DJ Moore. My official play is going to be Deebo Samuel at 6,800. But flip a coin between him and Ayuk. Again, Deebo is, my zone coverage play like every single week that he's under 7,000, and he plays a team that is high in zone coverage, which Seattle runs zone 86% of the time, second highest in the league. Deebo becomes a play for me. But Ayuk is, now that they're that close together, like here's some stats from PFF. Tied for 8th in fantasy points per route run against zone, Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. Wow. Samuel, 3 yards per route run against zone. That is exactly 3.00. 4th in the league. Ayuk, 2.81. That is 9th in the league. So these are 2 top 10 wide receivers production-wise against zone defenses. Again, a team that runs zone the second highest. I'm going with Deebo officially because – hey, he's going to run the ball more, and he saves you the $100. Also, hey, he's been my guy. He keeps coming through for me. Again, liked him against Seattle a couple weeks ago. He goes 7 receptions, 79 yards, runs a touchdown in. Liked him against Philly last week, gives me 100 yards and 3 total touchdowns. I'm not going away from him. Probably will next week, because I'm guessing if I'm right this week, he's going to be outside of our price range for me to talk about him. But until then, let's
He's on a heater. I love it. I freaking love it. I love it when we get hot. Just keep playing them. I think a lot of people end up making, again, the mistake of, especially in cash games, if a guy doesn't significantly go up in price and they're on fire, just keep rolling them. The perfect example was Fields last year. Remember, we hammered him until I think he went over. I think last year we used the 7,900 number or whatever, where we just, every week, line them up. My value is a true value. I'm going all the way down, but I do feel good about this. It's Jonathan Mingo, 3,500 at the Saints. I know it's not a great matchup, but what does Dave Eddy always say? Volume is king, and he is starting to see volume. He's coming off his best game on DK, scoring 12.9 points. Saw 10 targets. That's big, catching 6 passes for 69 yards. I actually spoke on the DFS Den, filling in for Chris Robin last week about why I liked Mingo. I say potential, MME play last week because we had a change in the offense. They spent capital on this guy. He's arguably, with no offense to Adam Thielen, the most talented receiver on the Carolina Panthers roster. And you made a great point of, I think they line up in 11 personnel as much as any team in the NFL, and they basically run the least amount of motion. So it's just running the same thing out over and over again. That makes it a little easier for the defenses. So hopefully that has stopped. And we saw a little bit last week. His offense looked a little bit better. But he's now scored 10-plus points in back-to-back games after only seeing 38 targets. His first 7 games, that's just over 5 per. He's seen 29 in his last 4. That's over 7 targets per 7.25 with at least 6 in each one of those games. But the big thing for me is 36% of his receiving yards this season have came the last 2 weeks. He's only 3,500. So, again, for cash game lineups, we're talking about like 11 points that we need to be a success. If he has 15 and 20, which he's very capable of, especially, I think, who knows what's going to happen in this New Orleans game. But, again, it's another game that we don't have to worry about the weather. It's indoor. It's on turf. I really do like Jonathan Mingo at that 3,500 price.
All right, well, I will not be following you down into the 3,500 range for my wide receiver 2 here. Although I do like I like it as just an against the grain play where New Orleans has been tough on wide receivers. But, yeah, I do think we're seeing a shift towards more Mingo as we go down the stretch because that's what this team should be doing. Like, you're not winning anything. I mean, I guess you're trying to win because you don't have your pick anyway.
Yeah, they don't have anything.
But
lose for.
But like the main thing right now is just to try to find something to build on in the future if you're Carolina.
Absolutely.
You're just trying to find connections. And yeah, your rookie QB to your rookie wide receiver is exactly the sort of thing you're hoping pans out. Like I said, not going nearly as cheap with my play here, which is 5,400 Rashee Rice against the Buffalo Bills. For all the Kansas City needs more receivers, and I'm not going to say that they don't, Rashee Rice looks good. And I continue to think Kansas City is right up there with anyone for who should be the favorites in the AFC because, well, number one, Mahomes and Andy Reid. But yeah, you only really need one other receiver that you can count on besides Travis Kelce. I mean, that's all they kind of had last year where they got random plays from like Kadarius Toney when he was healthy. But it was Juju, and then it was Kelce, and now I think that's Rashee Rice. The last 2 weeks, 41.1 points on DK, 16 receptions on 19 targets, 171 yards and a touchdown. Even the whole season, they've at least had him out there. He's only had 3 games on the year where he hasn't seen 5 targets. But I think we are seeing a legitimate shift towards Rashee Rice now. 2.7 yards per route run since their Week 10 bye. Obviously, not a huge sample size there. That's only 3 games. But that would rank. But yeah, we're seeing real targets. 6th among wide receivers in yards per route run over that 3-week span. The other thing, too, is, again, I always talk about, this guy's good against zone. This guy's good against man. Rashee Rice, pretty good against both. His 0.58 fantasy points per route run versus zone ranks 3rd in the NFL.
Wow.
But he averages 0.57 against man. So basically, he's the same guy. That still ranks 18th. So he's now top 20 in fantasy points per route run against both, which is great against a team like the Buffalo Bills, who ranks 18th in man rate and 16th in zone rate. Listen, Rashee Rice is the clear number 2 receiver on this team now. It's no question about it. He's better than the other guys. And I think that just continues. And this is a game we expect to see points. 2nd highest over-under of the week. Unsurprisingly, it's Pat Mahomes versus Josh Allen, who will be trying to overcome everyone talking about his coach, talking about the 9/11 hijackers aspirationally, which is just a wild thing to do in general, even more so when you have the one team that actually plays in the state of New York. Bizarre stuff. But anyway, Rashee Rice, love the play at 5,400.
I do too. I like kind of, I know it's hard to say this since they just lost, but I like that they're getting Pacheco more and more involved in the run game. That's going to open up things for Rice and Kelce, and obviously we know how great Mahomes is, so absolutely love that play. The tight ends this week, I'm going to go and tell you, I'm going super cheap with both. I don't know if you heard me at the beginning, but I'm trying to figure out a way to run Mixon, my boy Moss, and then either CMC or Kamara. So I've got to get creative. That's one of the reasons Mingo was given for one of my wide receivers. And it's why both of my tight ends are 3,400 or below. But I'm going to go with Gerald Everett, 3,400 versus Denver. If you want to go with Parham, the other tight end for the Chargers, I'm not going to knock you for that either. But I really wanted to go with Likely, who was $100 more. But I am concerned about the weather. I know that's normally good for tight ends, but he's kind of more of a wide receiver, honestly, than he is a tight end that just plays tight end. So, but I do like he's got a great matchup too. But Denver's just awful. 31st versus opposing tight ends on DraftKings. And Everett caught 4 passes in back-to-back games with 40 yards receiving, and both at 3,400. If he gets 8 points, hello, we're good, right? Like, again, that's that 3 times kind of number range. He's averaging 11.35 points per game in those. So, again, that is literally kind of right where we're looking at. And he only needs 10.2 points this week to hit the 3 times number that I look for in cash games. And in case you haven't looked, teams are really trying to defend Keenan Allen because Austin Eckler, I don't want to say he looks washed. Maybe he's hurt, but he don't look great. I mean, they're talking about giving Kelly rushing opportunities. Bad things are happening. They scored 6 points last week. I just think that Herbert and Everett have been playing together for years. They have a connection against a really bad defense versus tight ends. I'd be shocked he doesn't catch at least 3 or 4 passes. And at his price, if he does that, it's going to be a hit.
Yeah, I like those. That makes a lot of sense to me. I actually am going to go with Isaiah Likely as my play, which is it's simple in that, like you said, I'm not as worried about him versus some of the other guys. Like Zay Flowers would be a play that I would love if this was decent weather because, again, he's another guy. We love him against zone. Rams run a lot of zone. Lo and behold, though, Isaiah Likely also much better against zone. In fact, against man, 26 routes run this year, 0 targets. So he just gets erased against man. But against zone, I'm willing to play him. This is a guy, we saw him be productive last season when Mark Andrews has been out.
He's having like 12 points per game in PPR leagues when you see 6 targets, which you saw last week.
Yeah. And another thing I like about him is going back to college too, a guy who is pretty nimble after the catch, which is what I want in a rain game. I don't want someone who's only going to run 20 yards downfield and hope that he gets an accurate pass when the gusts are coming in. You can throw a 5-yard route to Isaiah Likely and he can turn it into 15. So for me, he is worth that risk at 3,500. And then, the other guy I'm looking at too, it's K. Dotton against your Falcons, which, we know. It's, though, again, just a super cheap combo you can do with Baker Mayfield where you spend, what is that, $8,400 on those 2 guys? And I think you're getting 2 touchdowns from Baker. Fingers crossed we get a pass heavy enough to get 300 yards. And if both those things happen, really like K. Dotton against that Falcons defense.
Yeah, he's my value too. Again, my Falcons suck versus tight ends. They just do. Last week,
you've driven it into my brain where I'm just like, oh, who's up against the Falcons? Because I know that you're going to be.
And what I like about this one so much is he's coming off a 0 target, 0 reception game. And I think people are going to look at that and go, oh, I'm not playing that guy. Mm-hmm. Even with that, his last 7 games, 33 targets. So that's basically 33 targets the previous 6 games. And then what I like even more versus an Atlanta team that, again, is awful versus tight ends, seen 11 red zone targets in the last 5 games. So I would be shocked if he doesn't hit 3 times his number. He needs 9 points, which is what he scored in the first game. And a reminder that he had a monster game earlier this year versus an equally bad defense versus tight ends in the Houston Texans, where he scored 24 points in a dome. In a game that kind of turned into a sneaky shootout, which is kind of what we think is going to happen here. I love K. Dotton at 3,100. He's going to be in a majority of my lineups because it just gives me so much more flexibility. I think he's going to hit 3 times his number, and it would not shock me at all if he hit 5 times or more of his number because Again, the advantage of watching your shitty ass team week after week is you know what they can and can't defend, and we cannot defend tight ends. All right, the flex. I am gonna go with my boy Drake London. Again, I'm going cheap with both of these because again, I just keep saying it. I'm gonna have those two backs. I'm gonna have Justin Fields. And then I'm either putting Kamara or CMC. I can already tell you, like, that part of my lineup is pretty much set. And Drake London is a guy I really like. He's 4,600 versus Tampa. You heard me, if you listened in the beginning, talk about Desmond Ridder, the Falcons' offense being so much better at home, especially the passing game. No surprise. Same goes for our boy Drake London. In home games since week 2, averaging over 8 targets, 6.5 receptions, big thing, 90 air yards per game, and 17.25 points per game on DK. On the road, it's just totally different. 6 targets, 3.3 receptions, only 52 air yards, 7.86 points per game. He has been a top 30 fantasy wide receiver his last 4 home games. He's been a top 30 wide receiver in PPR formats once all year when he's been on the road. And he had a decent game, actually, versus Tampa. It was his best game on the road this year. 11.4 points, saw 7 targets, caught 6 passes for 54 yards. Again, London has scored 15 points or more in 3 of his last 4 at home, and he's averaging 17 points. I think he's a steal because, again, you're looking at target volume. He's 4,600. And you're getting a guy averaging over 8 targets at home and 90 air yards. I like that very much. He's another guy that's probably going to be in a majority of my lineups for cash games.
I like those calls. Honestly, for me, I'm kind of just all in on this game when I look at the wide receivers. It's that Seattle, San Francisco
JSN.
game. Again, yeah, I like the 4 guys that are not Tyler Lockett to me are the 4 I'm looking at. Where again, like I said, I think you look at Ayuk. Ayuk has pretty much the same stuff as Debo straight up against zone defenses. But again, I like the Debo angle for $100 cheaper. DK Metcalf is on a tear right now. So again, if you want to go cheaper than both those guys and save $100, throw in DK Metcalf. 3 of his last 4 games, he's hit at least 16. And really,
the 67 this week? Sorry, Joe. 6,700 this week?
6,700 for DK. 3 of his last 4 weeks, he's gone 16-8, 20.4, 6.2. So that was the one bad game, which was against San Francisco, mind you. But he had 9 targets, so it's not like he wasn't seeing some options there. And then 40 points last week. But the 16 and the 20-point games, he had 98, 94 yards.
He's been
so he's literally 8 yards away from another 3 points in both those games. But probably my favorite combo, though, is to take your Ayuk, take your Samuel, get one of those guys, and pair him with JSN, who's all the way down at 4,100. Guy coming off an 11-target game against Seattle, which was a game they were back and forth. I'm hoping they'll score a little bit better against San Francisco this week. That San Francisco defense is getting a little bit banged up on the back end. I believe they just signed Logan Wilson because they just need DBs back there. So I think there's some openings. I lost it in my sea of tabs where over I think it's the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I can't remember the number though, where their rate of explosive plays allowed has skyrocketed the last couple of weeks because of the injuries on the back end. And so that's all the reason to look at DK, look at JSN, and feel like there's opportunity there. But yeah, we're talking about a guy who costs 4,100. It's going to be a pass-heavy script because, it should be clear now that I've talked about everyone except Kittle, everyone in the Niners passing game, that I think they're going to score a lot of points on Seattle. So Geno Smith is throwing 35-plus passes in this game. 4 of the last 5 weeks.
Both of their backs banged up, right? So it's even more so.
Both backs banged up.
That's a good call.
So, yeah, I just look at a guy who's coming off 11 targets, and he costs 4,100 in a passing game. he's going in my lineups.
I like it. My value play, and again, this is really more of an MME play, but I do like his upside, and that is OBJ 3,800 versus the Rams. Yeah. Potential revenge game, right? Obviously won a Super Bowl in LA, but he did want to re-sign there. They did not. Coming off the ACL. Since week 7, 9.9 points or more in 4-6. 32 targets, 7 and more in half of those games, 3 of 6, 18 receptions, 3+ and 4 of 6, and double-digit points in 3 of his last 4, touchdown in 2 of his last 3, and his last 4 games have accounted for on the season 48% of his receptions, 44% of his targets, 60% of his receiving yards, 63% of his DK points, and 100% of his touchdowns. Again, the weather's not great, but if you look at it, OBJ's not really being used as much as this big play guy in Baltimore. And it's also very similar to Flowers, where they're kind of getting them the ball and then letting them work. And I think that's only going to be enhanced this week if the weather stands. And, we have this bad weather game. So he is someone to consider for that. The defense is real quick. Joe, I've got 2. And really, it's honestly probably just one. Last week, the one thing I absolutely nailed was Indy was in 100% of my lineups. Thank God for the back-to-back punt blocks. But they only went because that saved me. I mean, literally, that was the difference. Right.
Yeah,
they went from having a crappy game to 17 points. But they only went up $300. And in their last 4 games, 70 points on DK. That's 17.5 per. 67 points allowed to opponents. That's only 16.75. 21 sacks, at least 4 in each. 9 turnovers forced. And again, they're getting Browning, who's making his 3rd start. And I know one of the first things Alan really taught me about when we became buddies is that these QBs, the more tape that they get on these guys, the more these defenses can figure out their tendencies. And that's why sometimes these guys will start hot and they'll have 1 or 2 great games. And then all of a sudden you're like, what the hell happened? The defense has kind of figured out how to scheme against them. The other one I do kind of like is the Jets 2,900 versus Houston. This is kind of like the Falcons game last week, but even worse weather-wise. We're talking strong winds, again, potential rain. And this Jets team, since week 7, they're by 16 sacks, 6 turnovers forced, 8 points or more in 4 of their last 6. And not only is it a potential bad weather game, no Tank Dell, potentially no Dalton Schultz. We know they have a corner that can handle Nico Collins if that's all they got to worry about. And no disrespect to Devin Singletary or my boy Damian Pierce, but the Texans, I don't trust their run game yet. So those are the 2 defenses I like. Who do you like of the defenses this week?
Well, this is an interesting one because you and I normally have the same defenses, but we're a little different this week. Probably my favorite is just the Cleveland Browns at 3,000 against Jacksonville. I think this is Cleveland is either the first or second best defense in the NFL, I would say, with Baltimore. We're getting either a backup quarterback or a hobbled Trevor Lawrence against that. So that feels to me like a pretty advantageous matchup. With PFF, they always look at I always like to check their offensive line, defensive line matchups. They have that as the second worst matchup for an offensive line, Jacksonville against Cleveland, in the passing game. The worst is Seattle against San Francisco, which is why, to me, the ideal play is JSN cheap, catches some short passes to be paired with Ayuk or Debo more than Metcalf. But yeah, easily, based on their numbers, the second worst matchup for an O-line against a D-line. So if we can get some sacks, again, against a Trevor Lawrence who's not going to be mobile or a backup, love that. A little more expensive, so I would just stick with that one, but I don't hate this one either. It's the Vikings against the Raiders. I just think that
3,500? Is that right? What is their price? I'm sorry.
3,100.
3,100. Thank you.
A defense that's played pretty reasonable under Brian Flores, who's came there. That defense was atrocious last season. It largely got Daniel Jones $160 million, or at least 80 some. That's guaranteed. So the fact that he's turned that defense around into a solid unit is impressive. And I just think he blitz at the highest rate, or at least it was the highest as of a couple weeks ago. Wink Martindale could have overtaken him. But yeah, I just think Aiden O'Connell against a lot of blitzes feels like something I like. And we're going super cheap. Jared Goff outside in the bad weather. The Bears at 2,400.
I thought about that.
I don't hate it. I thought
about that.
Jalen Johnson playing at an all-pro level, and maybe he gets us a pick 6 in this game.
I wanted to bring it up to Dave, but they're Lions fans, and I'm basically saying, hey, I think you guys are going to lose again. And I'm like, you know what? I'll talk to Joe about it. So this is perfect. I'm with you. Like, they've been pretty good. And I just, does this Lions team feel like it's built for this kind of game? Because it doesn't feel that way to me. I know Montgomery helps. But
there's a chance they just pound the run game and they, limit our opportunities for the Bears, whether that's DJ Moore and Fields or it's this Bears defense. But yeah, it's like they were so lucky to win that game against the Bears in Detroit.
Yep.
And now it feels like yeah. And so, now it feels like this. Now we're going to Chicago in an environment that I feel like, helps Chicago more than it does Detroit. So, I would be worried if I was a Lions fan about this one.
I really do. All right. 2 quick things and we'll get out of here. First one, I am up 1. We missed, I think, the last 2 weeks. Pittsburgh is giving 5 points. Are you taking them? I'll go ahead and tell you that I am. I'm giving the 5. I'm giving the 5. I'm sorry.
You're going Pittsburgh?
Yeah.
I'm torn here because I don't want to fall down.
No Ramondre Stevenson. No, they don't have anybody. No Devontae Parker. No, it's crazy.
I'm not sure if no Devontae Parker matters, but
that's fair. But I'm saying I
no
think
Stevenson does.
Thornton, I think, is their top receiver, is what I read.
Yeah, and I've seen him play, and he runs very fast.
I'll give you this, though, for you. New England is already 1st and 10 from the Pittsburgh 14, and we're 3 minutes into this bad boy. So take it as you will.
I don't believe in the Steelers at all. In our weekly pool, I was the only person to pick the Cardinals last week. I was not surprised by that game. The Bailey Zappi offense can work for like a drive because it's just wide receiver screens over and over again. And then you realize that, and it doesn't work. And so I would take the Patriots if it was Mac Jones. As much as I don't believe in him, I just think there's always a chance where with Zappi, it's just so limited. I'm just going to push this week.
We got 4 games left. I think it's a smart move.
Yeah,
it is.
I'm gonna pick a different spot, a team I can believe in more than this Patriots squad.
Well, we're gonna make it interesting too, Joe, because starting next week, we'll pick the Thursday, Sunday, and Monday night games. So we'll start doing 3 cards. The other thing I wanted to ask you, Devontae Adams at 7,600. I know you talked about it's a bad matchup, Minnesota blitzes, but 7,600, that's the cheapest he's been since week 3. Scored 43 points in that game. That is really low for Devontae Adams. I can't remember. Like I said, other than that, if I remember correctly, we had him that week because we were both like, holy crap, Devontae Adams is only 7,600 and it's indoors. Right. And I think Minnesota's going to score points. Like, how do you feel about that? Or would you rather have Jacoby, who I think is like 64?
For me, it's just I look at that price point. And I know it's low. There's cheaper guys I'd rather have. Per FTN, the Vikings give up 64 yards per game to wide receiver ones as the 8th lowest in the NFL. Like I said, they blitz a lot. There's going to be, I assume, some opportunities here. Maybe one of those hits, but I don't know. I feel like I like Michael Pittman more at 7,300. I like those Niners guys so much. I like it more than Nico Collins, who even without Tank Dell, I just look at the Jets defense and I go, no, I don't want any part of it. But yeah, there's guys I'd rather have than Devontae even in this matchup because I do think there's generally more opportunities against this defense for guys who aren't the number one receiver, and so I would rather go with Jacoby than Devontae this week.
And then,
which will of course come back to bite me when he scores 3 touchdowns because he's
I just
Devontae
care.
Adams.
No, I didn't know if I was going to ask you this weekend through text or phone calls. And I want to talk about it. The other thing, just real quickly, then we'll get out of here. Tyreek Hill versus the Titans this week. The Titans. Wow. Like, I mean, he's at 93 receptions. I think it's 1,400 yards. Maybe it's more than that. I think it's almost 1,500.
He might get to 2,000 in this game. He might get to 2,000.
We said that last week, and they got up too much. He's at 1,481, 93 receptions. What does his stat line have to be at the end of the year for him to win MVP? Obviously, he's got to hit the 2K, but is there anything else he has to do? Or is it even possible?
Honestly, I think it's possible. I think it might just be more dependent on the QBs in the league. Because I think of non-QBs, I would assume he's running number 1 probably ahead of McCaffrey right now because McCaffrey's awesome as ever. But yeah, he's potentially having, basically assuming he doesn't get hurt, knock on wood, a historic season. I mean, he's averaging 123 yards per game. In a 16-game season, wouldn't quite hit 2,000. Actually, that might be one of the keys, actually. If he could hit 2,000 in 16 games, if he could do that, and then obviously
so he basically needs 510 yards in 4 games is what he needs to hit it.
Yeah, I want to see the 2,000 in 16 games because I think that would matter to people. It'd be like, oh, this isn't a 17-game record. It's like this guy crushed it in the 16 games. Probably, I don't think he doesn't have any rushing touchdowns this year. He's got to get close to 20 scores, I think. If not hit that, he's at 12 right now. So he would have to score more than the 1 per game he's getting right now. And then it would help if Tua also threw, some picks in these games, just so people aren't just like, oh, it's Tua, which again is silly, but that's the way it works. And then, I think
16-1 currently on DK Sportbook, along with Christian McCaffrey, who is also 16-1.
And then I really think you need the QBs that we all believe in. And so not the Purdy and the Tuas, but like Mahomes, you can't have Kansas City win out from here because then it's Mahomes. And you can't have Baltimore.
What about Lamar? That's what I'm saying.
Lamar. Yeah.
He's 9-1.
And then obviously if the Cowboys win out from here, it's Dak. If the Eagles win out from here, it's Hurts. So to me, it really is probably more dependent on the top QBs in the league, none of them having a run. Because I think it's pretty much impossible if you have a QB that everyone's like, that's a top 5 QB, and they finish as the 1 seed. That guy wins. But if that doesn't happen, then I think it could. I mean, I think it's reality.
Like name it a QB award. If you're going to do that, just name it a QB award. Kind of like what I was saying about the other players when we came on. Name it a QB award. Say what it is.
It's the most valuable player. I think the Heisman, it's easier because there's no.
I think Tua is more valuable than like even Patrick Mahomes and those guys. Like I do for that Dolphins offense. You take Tua out, they don't win 7 games. Wait,
you mean Tyreek, right?
Yeah, Tyreek. I'm sorry. Yeah, you take Tyreek out of the.
Turn on me here.
No. You take Tyreek out of that Dolphins offense. I don't think they win 7 games. But anyway, we've ended up rambling for 30 minutes. I don't know if anybody's listening to us anymore. Anyway, we will have the rest of this discussion offline. Thank you so much for listening. We will be sure to put timestamps. If you just jumped on late and you want to go and see which positions, be sure to follow us both on Twitter, where again on Saturdays I always put out my favorite cash game plays in a thread. If I get Joe's lazy ass to do it, I would, but he wants to go to that premium behind paywall content. I just can't do that. But
I'll start doing it on threads. I'm gonna do the alternate. I'm gonna get us so you can be the Twitter guy. I'll be the threads guy.
God,
that's right. Social network for life.
You would be. But check out all the great work on Fantasy Six Pack. Be sure to check out the DFS Den show tomorrow night and the Sunday morning show on Fantasy Six Pack, and we will see you guys soon. See ya. Hopefully we have another good week. Peace.